Your man, Louie Tee. Welcome to the 2018 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man Louie Tee aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2018 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series as we cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so we'll get a score for each and every single player selected in said team's draft. We'll apply bonuses when necessary, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer, are in total control as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. The examples I'll give you are as follows: Dolphins, next. Next, Miami, next. Miami Dolphins, next. Fins, next. You get where I'm going with this. Speaking of which, the next team up in the series is, you guessed it, the Miami Dolphins. And you know my saying, that's that Dolphin shit. This particular draft, though, not that Dolphin shit. This isn't what I'm used to from the Dolphins. Normally, I'm gushing over the Dolphins draft. I'm talking about how they got so much better as a football team and they're the most talented team or one of the most talented teams in the league. And I always rack my brain as to why they're not performing at maximum efficiency. I'm not going to do that this year. This draft isn't bad, but it's not one of my favorite Dolphins drafts over the last 5 years. I'm not going to lie to you. This is the second year GM Chris Grier has been in control of this Dolphins roster and the draft. And look, this may turn out to be one of the better drafts for the Dolphins when it's all said and done. I think there are a number of guys in this draft that had enormous potential, but potential, as we all know, gets coaches fired in this league. And so I'm not sure what you're getting out of these 8 players that the Dolphins selected in this draft. I can tell you this much. At the top of the draft, you did some serious damage. In the middle, it's debatable. At the end, we'll see what happens with some of those selections. But nonetheless, we're going to break them all down here on this wrap-up. So without any further ado, let's jump into the Dolphins 2018 NFL Draft. And we start with their first pick. And it was a doozy. 11th overall, defensive back out of Alabama, Minka Fitzpatrick is the selection. So I'm not going to break Minka Fitzpatrick down as I've already done that in the Draft Prospects 101 series. So if you're looking for a thorough, extensive breakdown of Minka Fitzpatrick, go to the Louie Tee Network on YouTube, hit the playlist tab, and type in 2018 NFL Draft Prospects 101, and you'll find the breakdown for Minka Fitzpatrick and your next selection in this draft, as I've broken those 2 players down already. But I will say this, to me, Minka Fitzpatrick probably was the safest defensive player you could have selected in this draft. He was one of the best players, one of my top, I'd say 7 or 10 guys on my big board overall. And if you ask me, he's probably the safest player. One of those guys that you hear people say, well, the ceiling is extremely high and the floor is just as high. I mean, the floor for this guy is Pro Bowl football player. The ceiling for this guy is All-Pro Hall of Famer. That's how highly I think of Minka Fitzpatrick. He's so versatile. He does so many things for you on the football field. He's a good guy on the field, off the field, good character guy, comes from a winning program, understands football. He's a football player, very smart, a guy you can line up at multiple positions, in the box as a physical presence, as a strong safety. You can use him as a blitzer. You can line him up over the slot. Hell, the guy even played corner out wide as a boundary corner at Alabama in his career. So this guy can do a number of things, line up as a single high free safety if you need him to. Sky's the limit for Minka Fitzpatrick. I like my Minka Fitzpatrick close to the line of scrimmage, being aggressive. You don't know where this guy's going to line up. That's when he's at his best as a blitzer, just moving around, being a rover, just being a nuisance. That's what this guy does best, and I really like this situation for him in Miami. With a relatively young defense at that, I think he's going to come in and fit perfectly on this Dolphins defense. So this is a great selection. And honestly, in most drafts, this type of talent doesn't fall to you at 11. It just doesn't. It's not supposed to, but this is such a deep draft in terms of top-tier talent. Once the top guys went, the top 15 or 20 guys came off the board, then you saw a precipitous drop-off in terms of the level of talent. And then it just kind of balanced out and started to even out. But in that top 10, and because of the quarterbacks more specifically, because we saw so many quarterbacks go, you were able to get lucky and get your hands on a guy like Minka Fitzpatrick in the first round, 11th overall selection, defensive back out of Alabama. Minka Fitzpatrick, you already know what this is.
Hits one high, hits it deep, it is out of here!
As we move on to the second round, 42nd overall selection for this Miami Dolphins football team, tight end out of Penn State, Mike Gazecki is the selection. As I previously mentioned, I'm not going to break down Mike Gazecki here. I've already done that on the Draft Prospects 101 series. But again, much like I've mentioned before, it's a really good football player and a guy that I feel like is going to come in and boost this Dolphins offense. You've really been lacking a big play weapon at the tight end position. You thought you were getting that when you traded for Julius Thomas. It did not happen that way. And so now you look at what this guy and Gazecki brings to the table is a dynamic field stretching threat, a guy that can run the seam ball, ridiculous vertical leap. You saw it against Michigan when he went up and got the football in like quadruple coverage. The guy can leap. And so in the red zone, he's a guy you can just throw it up to, have him go get it. But also in between the 20s, this is a guy that can run routes, get open, and win against man-to-man coverage. And so this is a guy that you've been lacking in this offense for quite some time, someone that can give you something. You were hoping that Deion Sims would be that. He wasn't. You were hoping that Julius Thomas would be that. He wasn't. Well, now you have a guy that can stretch the field in the middle and open things up for some of the guys out wide like Kenny Stills and some of those other guys that you like, Devontae Parker, that have talent, that need the safety to be occupied. Now you have a guy that will do that. And if those guys command attention on the outsides, then you get a guy like Mike Gazecki winning on the inside. So this is a good look for the Miami Dolphins and their offense. And they're looking to be a little bit more explosive. This is a guy that can help you do that in the second round, 42nd overall selection. Now, I'll tell you this much. He doesn't block. That's why you drafted another guy later on in this draft to do that. It's not what he does. He catches the football and runs after he catches the football. But nonetheless, in the second round, 42nd pick overall, Penn State tight end Mike Gazecki for me is. So we now find ourselves in the third round with this Dolphins draft, 73rd overall selection. Linebacker out of the Ohio State University, Jerome Baker is the selection. So here's a guy in Jerome Baker, 6'1", 229 pounds. Obviously, the weight that I have there was pre-combine weight, so obviously a lot bigger now than he was when he was at Ohio State earlier in his career. But nonetheless, right around 230, which, again, like I've talked about numerous times, you're starting to see a change in the guards at the linebacker position to kind of combat teams throwing the football and having these explosive, dynamic tight ends. We just talked about one that you drafted in Mike Gazecki, guys that can stretch the field. You're looking for guys that can run with those athletic tight ends, guys that can run with running backs out of the backfield and cover out in space. It's a necessity now in today's NFL. Jerome Baker, one of those guys that a lot of teams viewed as a guy that could do that. But with those athletic gifts and exploits, a lot of times comes a negative. Guys that generally are this light aren't as strong and stout in the run game, and that's the problem you find here with Jerome Baker. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but let's talk about the things that he does well before we talk about the things that he doesn't. As we start with him, 22 reps of 2 1/4. That's a nice amount of reps for a 230-pound linebacker. 36-inch vert shows you the explosiveness that this guy brings to the table. 10.5 broad, again, just reiterating that this guy is dynamic and explosive in his movements. Career stats, 7 sacks, 17.5 tackles for losses, 2 interceptions, one of those which went for a touchdown versus Baker Mayfield in 2016 in the beatdown of Oklahoma at the Horseshoe. And then you've got 2 forced fumble, or I think that beatdown might have come at Oklahoma, actually, and they returned the favor in 27 at the Horseshoe, if I'm not mistaken. Nonetheless, 1 forced fumble in his career and 3 PBUs in 25 starts over the life of his 3-year career at Ohio State. So measurables, like I mentioned already, 6'1", 229. Not the best in the world, not ideal, not what you're looking for, but again, that's the trade-off when you're looking for athletically gifted linebackers. You're going to have to trade off in terms of size, girth, and stoutness in the run game, and that's what the Dolphins elected to do here with Jerome Baker. Speed, which is why you drafted this guy, his athleticism, 4.53. I talked about the 36-inch vert, talked about the 10.5 broad. So you were looking for an athletic linebacker here that can run, and to me, he screams weak side linebacker at the next level. And if he's not using that capacity, then you're using Jerome Baker wrong. It's just as simple as that. He's not a strong side. He's not an inside. He's a weak side linebacker in this league, and it is what it is. Athleticism, acceleration, like I said, redirect, all of these things go along with the athleticism that this guy puts on the football field. Can jump, can run, can move, can change directions quickly. All of these things, closes the distance quickly. All of these things are in that package when it comes to Jerome Baker. Awareness, it's solid. One of my biggest pet peeves with this guy, and why I don't think he totally maximizes the speed and athleticism that he possesses, is that he isn't one of those guys that's instinctual. He wants to see it before he reacts. And I think it's that hesitation that makes me really uncomfortable with Jerome Baker's game. He waits way too long before he just goes. And I'm like, bruh, pull the trigger. Go. Shoot your gun. Go. And he's just waiting and waiting. It's almost as if he's waiting for someone to come and block him before he starts to move. And he's not big enough to take on these blockers head on and win. So he needs to beat them to the spot. And a lot of times he just doesn't. His hesitation and his inability to be proactive and instead is being reactionary is what I think allows him to just be an average linebacker right now. If he were ever to put it all together and start to play at the speed that his athleticism suggests, you could be talking about a totally different animal here in Jerome Baker. But right now, what I've seen on tape, I'm just not seeing that from him. Tackling ability is solid. All right, this is a guy that has racked up some tackles at Ohio State, and generally he's a guy that wants to go and wrap up around the legs. There's nothing wrong with that. Just get a guy down on the ground. I don't really care how you do it. Just get him down on the ground, and that's generally what Jerome Baker elects to do, is to shoot the cuffs. Man coverage ability. Versus Penn State, he picked up a PI for face guard. And look, this is going to be his calling card at the next level. I think this is what the Dolphins drafted him for, is to be a guy that they can trust in coverage. Running with these tight ends down the middle of the field on these seam balls. Look, he's got to look back. All right, if he looks back for the football, he'll be just fine in coverage. Trust me, he will. He'll be just fine. He can run with these tight ends. He's got the athleticism. He's got good enough hips to turn and flip and run. He's just got to look back for the football. Find the ball. If he doesn't, he'll be in for a long career with a lot of flags, or maybe it'll be a short career with a lot of flags. We'll see what happens with that, but that's the only thing. He can't face guard. He's athletic enough to run with these guys. No need for him to be face guarding and not looking back for the football. Zone coverage, they used him a ton at Ohio State in zone drops. And it was essentially him just kind of eyeballing the quarterback, almost like one of those guys that are just in coverage, but not really in a specific place, kind of just eyeballing. A lot of times he was a quarterback spy. Other times he was like a lurker. And so there was really no defined zone drop for him, other than sometimes he would drop into hook zones. But a lot of times he would just drop over the middle of the field and kind of watch the quarterback's eyes. And it was solid, but he didn't make enough plays for me in those situations. And so I like him in zone, but I think there needs to be a more defined zone drop for him, if that makes any sense. Like I said, a lot of times he was spying quarterbacks or just kind of a lurker, and I don't know if he thrives in that role. I don't think he's hungry enough for the football. And like I said, he lacks instincts. So it's not like he's going to read quarterback's eyes, understand the route combination behind him and what the quarterback's trying to do, and go pick a pass off. He doesn't excel at that. It's not like this is an ex-safety with ball skills that you trust in that kind of a role. So, again, I'm looking for the Dolphins to really hone in and specify the role that they're looking for out of Jerome Baker because, again, I don't know if this guy is a three-down linebacker. I think he's more of a niche linebacker. And so I'll say this much before we move on. I liked Raekwon McMillan, the guy you got in the second round last year out of Ohio State, way more than I liked Jerome Baker. I'll just say that. And it's like you're getting another second-round pick back because Raekwon McMillan tore his ACL last year, missed all of 2017. So hopefully you get something out of these Ohio State boys and they're able to ball together. But I liked Raekwon McMillan last year way more than I do Jerome Baker this season. That is for sure. But nonetheless, blitzing capabilities, I like him as a blitzer. I'd like to see him be a little bit tougher. You know, running backs try to stand up to him. He's 22 reps at 2 1/4. You get a full head of steam. I'd like to see you run through that running back, not allow him to pick you up so easily. Guys try to cut you. You got to be aware of what's coming. You got to see them getting ready to try to cut you, sidestep it, jump over it, whatever you got to do to get to the quarterback. But I do like his ability to close, like I talked about earlier. His closing speed is ridiculous, and so he can close the distance very quickly, and that allows him to be a very effective blitzer. I talked about the 7 career sacks, so he can hit home. I'd like to see him blitzing a little bit more with the Dolphins. Hopefully that's something they have in store for him as well. And then range, obviously, when you're running a 4-5-3 as a linebacker, you've got plenty of range, and Jerome Baker has exactly that. So that's something else that he does bring to the table. But you go to his cons, slipping and shedding. And let's just couple these together. Taking on blocks. He's not afraid of taking on blocks. That's not the issue. The issue is defeating blocks. Taking on blocks is cool when you're in your gap, you're handling your responsibility, and everyone else around you is making plays. If your job is to just eat up a blocker in a gap, good for you. You've done your job on that play, and sometimes that's all your job requires is to just eat up a gap and not allow a guy free range up the B gap. And if that's your job and you do it effectively and the next guy is able to scrape and come down and make the tackle, good. You did what you were supposed to do. But 9 times out of 10, you're looking for your linebackers to not just be a guy on the field. You're looking for them to make plays, make tackles. You're looking for them to be the guys that clean up after the defensive line, the linemen are supposed to be the guys eating up blockers, occupying gaps, and allowing the linebackers to roam free. When that doesn't happen, though, that's where you separate the elite linebackers in this league from just guys. And to me, Jerome Baker is just a guy because he didn't get off of blocks, period, end of discussion. He's not slipping. Guys slip blocks when they're able to beat blockers to the spot. Well, Jerome Baker's hesitation that I mentioned earlier stops him from beating offensive linemen, tight ends. He made Mike Gazecki, the guy you drafted in the second round, who doesn't block, he made Mike Gazecki look like the second coming of Rob Gronkowski or Travis Kelce as a blocker. It was ridiculous. I mean, Gazecki was blocking him effectively, and I'm like, dude, it's Mike Gazecki. If you don't blow his ass up or run circles around him and get to the ball carrier, but that's not in his DNA. So for me, Jerome Baker is a guy that if you keep him clean, he's going to make a bunch of tackles. He's going to make a bunch of plays. If you allow a lineman, a tight end to get to him, he's going to get blocked, and he's not getting off of that block. He's not slipping. He's damn sure not going to shed the block. So, I mean, that's my biggest gripe with him is that if he's not kept clean, he is ineffective in the run game, period. Okay? Right now, I look at him as a nickel linebacker right now. Weak side linebacker in your base set if you're running a 4-3 defense. And even then, I still don't know if I trust him to be on the field just because I don't think he can hold up his own in the run game. But again, I'm going to give him every opportunity as a third-round selection and a guy that can run, that's highly athletic. I'm going to give him every opportunity to prove to me that he can't be on the field on first and second down. Where he's going to make his money most likely in this league is going to be on third downs. But we'll see what is to come of Jerome Baker and what role they have in mind for him at the next level. Nonetheless, in the third round, 73rd selection overall, Ohio State linebacker Jerome Baker for me is as we mosey on to the fourth round, 123rd overall selection, Notre Dame tight end Durham Smyth is the selection. As a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan, I always look for the next guy in line at the tight end position. We've, just like Stanford, we've turned out probably the most productive tight ends over the last decade in the National Football League. It's just fact. It's just what we do at Notre Dame on the offensive side of the football, along with offensive linemen. We churn out tight ends. So I was looking for the next guy in line, and we've had a slew of them come into the league. And I thought Durham Smyth would be the next guy in line. And obviously the Dolphins like what they saw out of Durham Smyth. And that's good. That's all fine and dandy. But he was somewhat of a disappointment at Notre Dame. Now, all of it wasn't his fault. Okay, Notre Dame did not have a very stable quarterback position over the last 4 years or so, which pretty much spans the life of Durham Smyth's career while at Notre Dame. Some injuries have hampered him in his development, but the quarterback position also had a lot to do with that. So when you hear about some of his shortcomings from a production standpoint, you got to take some of that into consideration and take it with a grain of salt. That being said, he never moved me as a guy that was athletically gifted like we've seen from Notre Dame tight ends in the past. And so he never really won me over as a guy that I thought was a true difference maker at the tight end position. But he is a guy that will block. And in this league, where not a lot of tight ends come in with the mindset of, I need to block, Durham Smyth will always be welcome in this league. So what I look at him as, and this is my comp for him, is Anthony Fasano, another Notre Dame Fighting Irish tight end that came out once upon a time, that came into the league and has been a Dolphin favorite, guy that has been in multiple stops in Miami, and a guy that they seem to like, and still in the league right now fighting. As a guy that can block, catch a couple passes here and there, but most likely you're going to find him blocking some defensive end, some edge rusher, and sealing off the edge and opening up holes in the run game, and that's what the Dolphins hope Durham Smyth can do, and catch an occasional pass or two. They saw Mike Gazecki as the pass catcher. They look at Durham Smyth as the run blocker. Let's talk about Durham Smyth and what he brings to the table. 6'5", 253 out of Notre Dame. 18 reps of 2 1/4. Never had a game with more than 52 yards receiving in his career. So that tells you all you need to know about the lack of production here. 15 catches, 244 yards, and 1 touchdown in 2017, which was his best year of his career, all career highs, except for the touchdowns, which he had career highs of 4 in 2016 to go along with 9 catches and 112 yards. Shoulder and knee injuries cost him 10 games in 2015. So again, you're talking about a guy that had his growth stunted by the quarterback position and injuries as well. But you look at his measurables at 6'5", 253, with a frame that may be able to put on another 5 to 7 pounds. You're looking at a guy that's going to be more than sturdy enough for the run game in the National Football League. Excuse me. You look at his speed. He's a 4.8 guy, 4.81 officially, but he's a guy that runs about a 4.8, which is right around the going rate for most blocking tight ends with a little bit of athleticism, and so he fits right into that category. Pass catching ability, he can catch the football. I don't think that his exploits as a receiver were ever fully tapped into at Notre Dame. Again, there were a number of circumstances as to why, as I've already chronicled. But, you know, I watched him in a number of games, and as a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan, I just watched him in general. And there were some times where he made some catches where I opened my eyes and I said, wow, I didn't know you could do that. There's a catch, and this wasn't a major catch in the game, but versus Texas on an out route, you know, defender raiding this grill, ball thrown extremely high. He goes up, climbs the ladder, and snags the football, gets a foot down in bounds. It's pretty impressive for a 6'5", 250-plus pound guy. And so it just shows his ability to go and pluck the football out of the air, shows his ability to use his catch radius, shows his ability to use his hands, and shows his ability to use his body to shield away defenders. So there's a number of things that one play showed, and he possesses that. Route running ability, not going to scare anybody in the least. It barely made it on the positives, but nonetheless, it's a positive on my list. But he's a guy that I think telegraphs routes. He doesn't have enough quickness, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, to scare anyone. So guys are sitting on routes. Watching him against Texas, again in 2016, there was a linebacker playing him, shading him to the inside because he had help to the outside. And Durham Smyth ran an outbreaking route, and the linebacker that was shading him to the inside still had the amount of time and the ability to get to the outside and still knock the ball away because Durham Smyth just isn't quick enough. In any event, catch radius, I talked about him having some long arms and being able to go out and extend away from his frame, so that's something you get with him as well. Toughness, he's a tough cookie, though. For everything that I've said about him, in the passing game and as an athlete and all of those things, the guy is tough as nails. He'll go in there, stick his helmet in there, he'll block, he'll do whatever it takes, and you got to respect that at the tight end position when there are a number of tight ends that want no part of the run game whatsoever. That is not the case with Durham Smyth. Run blocking ability might be his single strongest attribute at this moment. Pass blocking, he's good enough at that department right now, in that department, but I think he can get a little bit better there. Sometimes he's a little slow to get out to his guy and stay in front of him, but in any event, he's willing to do that as well. Awareness doesn't always get to his man, as I just mentioned with the pass blocking. Doesn't always get to his man fast enough for my liking. Allows some unnecessary pressures in some situations, but all in all, he knows who to block, when to block them, and does a quality job of doing his job. Versatility, they lined him up some of everywhere at Notre Dame. They lined him up in the slot. They lined him up offset. They lined him up in line a ton. They lined him up in the backfield. So Durham Smyth was everywhere for that Notre Dame Fighting Irish offense. Stamina, solid. This guy, like I said, was a blocking tight end for the most part and was on the field quite a bit in South Bend. So you go from those pros to his negatives and his cons. Quickness, suddenness, as I'm kind of alluded to before. I didn't come right out and say it, but yes, this guy doesn't possess much suddenness nor quickness in his route running ability, and so he's not going to win off of athleticism. He's going to win by separating with sheer size. That's how he's going to win, and you're going to have to put the football in a place where he can get it and the defender can't, and it will allow him to use his body as a shield, but he's not going to beat anybody with a stick nod and shake somebody. He's going to have to be savvy, learn how to use this shoulder to push off very subtly at the stem of a route. He's going to have to learn the nuances of the game if he wants to stick around as a pass catcher in his career. Collegiate production, as I talked about at the top, it just isn't there, you know. And if you're gonna judge him on that, then you're gonna have a hard time accepting this as a fourth-round pick. But I'm here to tell you, don't do that. That's not what the Dolphins are looking at him as. They're looking at him as a guy that can help them in the run game, block guys up front, and then when you fall asleep behind the wheel thinking he's only in there as a blocker, he's going to catch a pass or two and help you in that regard as well. And then red zone threat, only 6 career touchdowns for Durham Smyth. So not a real red zone threat right now, but again, don't let that stop you from giving this guy opportunities in the red zone. He's a 6'5" threat with long arms that can get up and go get the football. So I'd say that while only 6 touchdowns in his career at Notre Dame, this is a guy that might be able to really help you in the red zone as a guy that can make some plays down close to the end zone. So we'll see what this comes about. But like I told you, he reminds me a lot of Anthony Fasano. And similar build. Fasano was a little bit bigger coming into the league, but similar build, similar athleticism, and similar skill set. So if he has any type of career like Fasano, I think Durham Smyth will take that right now and run with it. And nonetheless, 4th round, 123rd overall selection, Notre Dame tight end Durham Smyth for me is. Now, this here is the quintessential Miami Dolphins pick if I've ever seen one. Reminds me so much of the pick you made, I think it was 2 years ago, out of Alabama. Similar type of back, similar size, similar athletic exploits. A guy that you looked at and you said, man, if, the big thing with him was if he could stay healthy, if he could maximize his talents. If was the big word with him. And we've seen a little bit of what he could do last year, okay? If this guy is anything like that guy, then you got something here in the 4th round, 131st overall selection. Running back out of Arizona State, Kalen Ballage is the selection. .6'2", 228 stands Kalen Ballage, and everyone was going goo goo gaga. I think this might have been the favorite running back that everyone wanted to talk about pre-draft until you actually turned on the tape. And again, if you just watched the combine and you saw how big this guy was, 6'2", 230, you saw how fast he ran, 4.46, and you said, wow, man, this guy's a freak, then, that catches everyone's eye. But when you put on the tape, then you saw, he's good, but, So, you see his size, you see how fast he ran, you hear that he had an 8-touchdown game versus Texas Tech, and you're saying to yourself, wow, now if you watch that game, we all know that 6 of those touchdowns literally came inside the 5-yard line, and they were all out of wildcat formation, where he literally got the snap, and there were 10 guys blocking for him. And now, look, I don't want to take anything away from him. He made some plays. There were a couple where he had to stiff arm some guys to get to the edge and make a play to get to the end zone. But, I mean, let's not act like he had, 4 runs of over 40 yards, a couple of catches for over 20 yards, and, a couple of 2-yard touchdown runs. They literally 8 touchdowns in that game, and he didn't eclipse 200 yards rushing in that game. So, in any event, I don't want to take anything away from him. Still 8 touchdowns, still tied an FBS record for most touchdowns in one game by a player. But nonetheless, this guy is very talented. I'll say that at the top. But there are questions as to why weren't you the guy at Arizona State? Why weren't you starting? Why weren't you getting the bulk of the carries? Okay, why was Demario Richard taking more of the lion's share of carries than you were if you're the more talented back? Why are you fumbling the football so much? There are questions. If he can rectify some of these things, you got a steal on your hands in the 4th round, but let's break him down quickly. 15 reps of 2 1/4, 10-1 broad. Again, that speaks to the explosiveness here at 6'2", 228, running a 4.46. That was a kick returner all 4 years at ASU. So you get that added value if you want to tap into that. 450 career carries for 1,984 yards and 27 touchdowns in his career. All career highs in 2017, 157 carries, 669 yards, and he had 16 touchdowns in 14 touchdowns in 2016. So that was his high in that category there, though. But also 82 catches for 684 yards and 2 touchdowns in his career. So underrated as a pass catcher, but he can do that as well. So right now, you look at him, and worst case scenario, you're getting a third down back. But the Dolphins hope he's more than that, more than just a change of pace. A guy that, in a pinch, if they need him to, can tote the rock 15 times and catch it an additional 5 times and still return 4 kickoffs. They're hoping he can do a little bit of everything and do them all well. So, obviously, I talked about his speed at the top of this breakdown. 4.46 is ridiculous for a guy his size. To pick him up and put him down that fast at that size is fascinating, to say the least. Quickness, he has some good quicks, especially in the hole, in and out of cuts. I think he does a really good job of changing gears. All right, I love the fact that when he gets in the hole, he's not in a rush. Sometimes I feel like he can be in a rush to the line of scrimmage, but once he gets into the hole, I feel like there's a level of patience that he exudes. He's able to change gears and tempos, slow down to make a jump cut, to then accelerate. So I love his quickness. I think that's one of his attributes there. Nice little jump cut, little hop cut, hop step. Acceleration is good. When he turns it up, when he gets a chance to open it up, against Texas Tech, I was able to see him. There was one run that didn't even count as a touchdown, where it initially was ruled a touchdown. Might have been his most impressive run of the year, where he runs down the sideline. You get to see him open up, so he gets a run, goes off tackle, is able to bounce it outside, go down the sideline. You see him open it up, and for a minute there, you see the burst, outruns an angle. Guy finally tracks him down from behind and gets a piece of him. He runs over a defender, trucks him over on some old Madden type stuff, just straight truck sticks him, gets into the end zone. It was later ruled that he stepped out of bounds and around the 4-yard line. Didn't matter. A couple plays later, Wildcat, he ran it in any damn way. But nonetheless, you got to see the acceleration there. So you get to see it at times with him. Agility, like I said, nice feet, a guy that can jump cut quickly. So the agility is definitely there. Vision, I have it as a positive here, but it could have just as easily been a negative. I put this down in my notes, and I don't know if you saw this, but this is what I saw. Doesn't seem to cut back or jump cut very often to his left when approaching the line of scrimmage. A lot of times where he's not comfortable, he feels threatened at the line of scrimmage, or he doesn't like what he sees, his first inclination is just to cut right. Doesn't want to jump cut to his left. And I can't tell you how many times on tape I'm watching, I'm like, bruh, there is 7 to 8 yards of real estate if you just go to your left. And instead, he'll go to his right, and the right is all types of clogged. There's so much traffic and nonsense going on his right, and he'll run into a 3-yard loss, or he'll run into no gain, or he'll run into a 1-yard gain, or he'll run into a 1-yard loss. And I'm like, bruh, if you would have just jump cut to your left, man, there could have been something there. And so he's just got this inclination to always want to go right. I don't know if it's something that subconsciously he does, or I just didn't see him go to his left very often. And so that's a lack of vision, because I don't care what you're comfortable with. If there's a gaping lane to your left and there's a bunch of traffic to your right, and you decide to just put your head down and get 2 yards by running up the back of your offensive lineman, I've got a problem with that. So I question his vision at times. I'm not saying that he's blind as a back, but I question his vision at times. Make you miss, I don't think he really possesses a ton of make you miss. He'll run you over, and occasionally he'll put the stiff arm out there. I'd like to see him put the stiff arm out there even more. There are times where I feel like, bruh, put the stiff arm out there and see what happens. He puts the stiff arm out there a lot around the end zone, but between the 20s, I'd like to see him put the stiff arm out there a little bit more. But in terms of juking a dude, that's not in Kalen Ballage's arsenal right now. Contact balance, it's solid. He'll run through an arm tackle, and if you're not careful and you come slipping and tripping, he'll run you over. Toughness, durability, he's a pretty tough guy, and he's built for tough at 6'2", 228. So that wasn't an issue throughout his career. Did have a mono one time, and that cost him a few games back in like 2015, but durability hasn't been one of his issues a while at ASU. And maybe that has to do with the fact that he wasn't carrying the bulk of the load, and that kept him relatively fresh, which is a good thing if you're a Dolphins fan. But in any event, pass pro, he's okay at it. He needs some work. He's a guy that really wants to cut you. And at 6'2", 230, I'm like, bro, if you don't just stand up there and take on these dudes, he's more inclined to cut than he is to just stand up and stonewall a guy. But look, I don't really give a damn how you get it done. Just get it done. But he's got to be a little bit more effective as a pass protector. I think there are times where he's a little soft back there as a protector. Awareness, he does understand who to block. He does understand when his presence isn't needed in the backfield and for him to get out as an extra option for the quarterback to get the football to. So that is something that he brings to the table. Snap volume could have easily been a negative because he wasn't the guy at ASU, but because he did so much, because he was the guy that they trusted on third downs, because he was the guy that was in there catching the football, the guy that did still get over 100 carries this past season, and a guy that did return kicks. There was definitely some stamina there, and a guy that they trusted in certain situations. Versatility, I just told you that this guy caught it out of the backfield, ran it out of the backfield, and also doubled as a kick returner. So a lot of versatility comes with Kalen Ballage. Patience, like I said, sometimes he lacks it getting to the line of scrimmage, and you know the old adage, patience to the hole, explode through the hole. And sometimes I think he is a little bit too hasty to get to the hole, get to the line of scrimmage, but in the hole, I think his patience is outstanding. So there is a level of patience with Kalen Ballage. And leg drive, I think, is really good. Again, you 6'2", 228, you should have good leg drive. You should be able to power through and get the first down on 3rd and 1. If it's one guy trying to single you up, I need you to run through him and get that yard and get that first down and move the sticks. And Kalen Ballage generally is able to do that. So you go from all those pros to some of his negatives. And really, the only negative that I have right now is ball security. And actually, I switched his score and I made it a positive. So he barely made it out of the negatives there. But 8 career fumbles, 3 of them lost, is way too many for me. You're averaging, in a 4-year span, you're averaging 2 fumbles a season. That's too many. And he only had 1 in 17, which is why I bumped him up, because a lot of his fumbling issues were a little bit earlier in his career. Nonetheless, he's got to protect the football, got to protect the rock. The easiest way to find the bench is by fumbling the football. So if he's able to protect the rock, I think he's a guy that's going to see the field early and often. And I know you went out and got Frank Gore. And so you've got a nice mixture in that backfield now. And I think it's a perfect situation for Kalen Ballage to be in, because he's already got a back there that's similar to him in size, athleticism, and pretty much a clone of him that's already there in the back that you got out of Alabama a couple of years ago. And then you got a nice, savvy vet that can show these young guys the ropes that I think will really benefit both of them when it's all said and done. So I really like what you have in your backfield right now. And I think it's a really good spot for Kalen Ballage to learn, become a better runner, become a better pass protector, become better at everything. And I think it's going to be a good situation for him. So I like the fit. I like the back. And I think that his best football still ahead of him. So this is a nice pickup here in the 4th round, 131st pick overall. Running back out of Arizona State, Kalen Ballage for me is as we get to the 6th round, 209th selection overall, cornerback out of Southern Miss, Cornell Armstrong is the selection. So here's an intriguing guy here in Cornell Armstrong. Was really impressed with what I saw from him on tape. 5'11", buck 93, little on the small side. And question is, what are the Dolphins going to ask him to do? I'm always a guy and a proponent of, hey, until you prove to me you can't, I'm going to give you a chance to prove that you can. So he played out wide at Southern Miss. Try him out wide, see what happens. But I think you've got a number of long corners that you've drafted over the last couple of years that you really like. So if you like those guys, then Cornell Armstrong, to me, is a guy you put in the slot at 5'11", and I think he can play the slot. I think he's got enough quickness, definitely got enough speed to carry routes, long routes. So I think that his quickness, his agility, his ability to stop, plant, and drive, these are all things that I look for in a slot corner, and he has it in spades. So if the Dolphins were smart, they'll look at this guy as a really strong candidate to be their new slot, even if not in his rookie season down the line. But he's got to make the roster first. Nothing's guaranteed to a 6th-round selection, but nonetheless, 38.5-inch vert. Right there, that tells you that this guy's got some explosiveness, which he does. 3-year starter with 40 career starts. Did have an ankle injury that cost him 3 games in 2017, so you're hoping that he's not an injury-prone guy. Hate when guys go down to injuries that cost them multiple games, but what can you do? Things happen. 5 career interceptions, 29 PBUs, and 9.5 tackles for loss throughout his career. One of those 5 interceptions went the distance for a touchdown. Also scooped up a blocked kick and took that the distance as well in his career. So a lot of different things Cornell Armstrong able to bring to the table for Southern Miss. You look at his measurables, 5'11", $193. To me, that's not ideal in today's NFL for a boundary corner, but guys still play out wide at sub 6 feet. So he won't be the first, won't be the last if asked to do so. But I saw him struggle versus the receiver at Florida State, Auden Tate. Beat him like he stole something in that game. And it wasn't fair. Auden Tate's like 6'5", 6'6". This guy's 5'11". And there wasn't anything Cornell Armstrong could do in some situations. Tried to jam him at the line of scrimmage in some zone coverage, and the safety didn't get over in time. I don't really know if that was Cornell Armstrong's fault, really, on that one. I thought his jam was good enough. Maybe he could have got a better piece of him. But, again, Auden Tate's 6'5", 220 pounds. This guy's 5'11", $193. I mean, how much of a jam are you really going to get off? Touchdown in any event because the safety didn't get over in time. Auden Tate makes a big catch over the middle where he just boxes Cornell Armstrong out on a post route over the middle. Safety comes over, lays a shot in Auden Tate, but he holds on to the rock. And Cornell Armstrong simply couldn't do anything. He just wasn't big enough. So I prefer to see this guy in the slot nonetheless. Speed is something that helped him get drafted at 4'4", 340. This guy can pick him up and put him down. Athleticism is off the charts. Change of direction and agility. I put down in my notes, beautiful plant, pivot, and drive on a diving knockaway versus Louisiana Tech. It's those types of plays that makes me think that this guy's a natural fit in the slot because there's a lot of stopping, starting, a lot of pivoting, a lot of driving and planting and driving on the football in the slot. Quick movements, guys trying to win on shake routes in the middle of the football field on third and manageables. You've got to have quick reflexes. And the slot might be the hardest position to play on defense. And I think this guy is built to be able to do that at the next level. Acceleration, again, this is another attribute that is a necessity for someone playing in the slot. You've got to be able to accelerate. Shallow crossers and things where guys make a move, and you may lose initially, but if the quarterback comes over to them late, you've got to be able to make up ground quickly and get back into the play. Cornell Armstrong, a guy that I think is capable of that. I saw him do that on a pick versus Charlotte in the end zone in 2015 where the receiver's running a drag route across the field in the end zone. Quarterback rolls out looking for the receiver coming across the field, and Cornell Armstrong in trail technique right there. Quarterback thinks he's got an open receiver. Cornell Armstrong at the last minute zooms in, uses that acceleration to pick the pass off in the end zone. I saw him do it again versus North Texas on a play where it's an overthrow. He's in zone coverage, comes all the way from his outer third to the middle third of the field to pick off a pass that was slightly overthrown. Again, the acceleration, the key component in that interception on that play. So acceleration is one of his biggest attributes right now. Anticipation and awareness. He's very aware, sees what's going on. I'd like him to be more of an LLCer. That's something we'll talk about a little bit later on. But nonetheless, he's aware And when he does see what's going on, he's a guy that will try to make plays on the football. Ball skills, he did have 5 career interceptions, and 1 went for a house call. But I saw him drop a surefire pick 6 versus La Tech. Those are the kinds that I jump up and down and scream and grab my hair when I see those. Like, guy, what are you doing? You got to catch that. You can't drop pick 6s. Outbreaking route, thrown too far to the inside. You read it, you break on it. It's all yours. Yum, yum, eat them up. Yum, yum, eat them up. Go take that to the crib. Can't drop those. So I question his ball skills at times, but look, the guy can catch. But you got to have that one. I got to have it. Got to have it. Nonetheless, one of the things I was most impressed with him was his tackling ability and his willingness to tackle. At 5'11", 193, a lot of these guys, they're like, hey, look, man, I'll help you if you need me. I'm back here. I'm back here in the clutch. If you need me, just holler. I got you. But if you got it, I'm going to just be back here as the last line of defense. This guy is aggressive. He's looking to come up. He's looking to tackle guys. I talked about 9.5 tackles for loss. This guy's coming up. He's being aggressive at the line of scrimmage. He's blowing up screens. I mean, he's going the extra mile to make plays. A lot of corners want to play behind blocks and try to kind of just stay in a way and not give up the outside. This guy's looking to go make a play. So I like his aggressiveness as a tackler, man. I really do. That was fun to watch. Man coverage ability. He's good in man. Really good in man. I just want him to look back for the football some more. But I like his ability to adjust to what the receiver is doing. Now I just need him to adjust in enough time to where he feels comfortable to look back and locate the football. Zone coverage versus Florida State, he struggled versus Auden Tate, like I mentioned before. Gave up the touchdown. Again, I put that more on a safety than I do him. Also was playing cover 3 on a post that Auden Tate was able to catch over the middle of the football field. So he's solid in zone coverage. I like him more in man, though. His versatility, I think he's got the versatility to play inside or out, but I think his home at the next level might be as a slot corner. We'll see what the Dolphins have in mind for him if he, in fact, makes this roster. And what you got to know is a lot of times with these newer GMs, the first 3 years or so, a lot of their draft picks are going to make the team. You know, in a draft like this where there's only 8 players selected, 7 or 8 of all 8 of these guys, or 7, at least 7 of these guys are going to make the team most likely. You know, you're going to have some turnover because a lot of the players that he inherited, he being Chris Greer, he wasn't a fan of all of these guys. You can't cut everyone at the same time. You got to field a 53-man roster. You got to keep the players that give you the best opportunity. But at the first chance he gets, he's going to get his guys in there and get rid of the guys that were there when he got there that he wasn't a huge fan of. So expect a guy like Cornell Armstrong, if he improves in camp, expect this guy to make the roster. Nonetheless, we go from all those pros to the one con I have, and it's him not being an LLC, or it drives me nuts. There are a number of knockaways that he had. He didn't look. He got lucky. And some of it is luck, some of it is skill, because there's an art to not looking back for the football, seeing the receiver go for the football, and then raking at his arms and prying the football loose. There's an art to that. All right, there's an art form, because you can't look back every time. You know, I sit here and I talk about being an LLCer all the time, and there are plenty of times, I think there about 70% of the time you can look back for the football. There's about a good 30% of the time, out of 10 throws, there's 3 of them that you can't look back for. You don't have time. You got beat. Guys got to step on you. Ball's coming. You can't look back. So you got to have the ability to rake at the arms and play the football that way. You've got to have that ability in your arsenal as well. You're not going to be able to locate the football every time. But there are times where you can look back. About 7 out of those 10 throws, you should be able to look back and locate. And of those 7, he may look back once or twice. That's problematic for me. You're gonna pick up PIs that way. He's got to look back and look, and he's good enough to do it. That's why I'm so upset at him, because I know he's good enough to do it. He possesses the athletic exploits to do that. So I really like this guy. As a 6th-round pick, I think that he has a shot to not only make this roster, but be an impactful guy that makes this roster. In the 6th round, 209th overall selection, Southern Miss cornerback Cornell Armstrong, for me, is If we go to the 7th round, Dolphins had 2 selections to wrap up their draft in the 7th round, the first of which was 227th overall. Linebacker out of Ohio, Quentin Poling is the selection. So Quentin Poling is 6 feet, 235 pounds, out of Ohio, 38-inch vert, 10.7 broad, ex-safety in high school. So you see some of those traits in his game. His pro day is what got him drafted. The 38-inch vert, the 10.7 broad, the 4.5, 8.40, all would have been in the top 10 at the linebacker position at the combine. So this guy tested off the charts. And I've always been a proponent of taking guys like that in the 7th round. To me, that's when you take a flyer out on a height, weight, speed specimen. He doesn't have the height nor the weight, but the speed and the athleticism is off the charts. And those are the kind of guys you draft in the 7th round, and you just see if they got anything. If there's anything worth having there, you just give them a run and see what you get. And if you get nothing, you move on. 7th round pick, you don't feel any way about it. So I always like when teams divulge a pick, invest a pick in the 7th round in a height, weight, speed guy or a guy that's uber athletic, and you just see what happens. And that's what they did here in the 7th round. Nothing wrong with it. Career stats, 43.5 tackles for loss, 18 sacks, 7 INTs, 2 of which went to the crib, 7 forced fumbles, and 14 pass breakups. So guy was extremely active. 2 straight 100 tackle seasons to wrap up his career at Ohio. So you're talking about a guy that put in tons of work at Ohio. So measurables, 6 feet, 235. Another one of these lighter linebackers, but again, that's more of the going rate now in this league, especially if you're looking at a nickel linebacker or a guy that can run with these tight ends and running backs, as I mentioned with Jerome Baker. You're looking for similar things out of Quentin Poling. So again, that's the size that you're pretty much going to get. It's rare to get a guy that's 250 pounds that can run. That's what made a guy like Virginia Tech linebacker so attractive in this year's draft. Is you get a guy that's 6'5", 250 running a 4.5, which is crazy. You generally don't get that. So generally you got to take the 6 feet, 235 if you're looking for a guy that can run, and Quentin Poling can do that. Speaking of which, 4.58 speed, like I mentioned before, off the charts for a guy his size. You're looking for them to come in and be able to cover. And him having ex-safety background in high school helps him in that department. Athleticism, acceleration, redirect, all of those are really good athletic traits that Quentin Poling possesses. And so he's a guy that can help you in that realm as well. Taking on blocks, the thing I like about him is he fights to disengage. Unlike Jerome Baker, who submits. You put hands on Jerome Baker, his pads are like an adhesive. Once a guy gets their hands on Jerome Baker's pads, they stick to him like glue. Quentin Poling is a guy that is looking to get off of that block. He's fighting his ass off. Now, he may not successfully defeat that block, but he's going to fight or die trying. That's all I can ask for. So he fights to disengage, and at times it allows him to shed blocks. So much like Jerome Baker, not instinctive enough that he slips blocks, and his athleticism says that he should be able to slip blocks and win and get to a spot before a blocker does, but a lot of times he's waiting, much like Jerome Baker. So I like the fact that he will fight and try to shed. If you're not going to slip, at least fight to shed, and he does that. Tackling ability, I just told you, 2 straight years of 100-plus tackles, so the guy's a machine as far as tackling is concerned. Man coverage, I don't necessarily love him in man coverage situations. I much prefer him in zone. As a matter of fact, I have him down in the negatives in man coverage. Despite him being able to run, I don't love him as a zone coverage linebacker, but or a man, excuse me. I don't have a problem with him in zone, though. So Thought he had a nice zone drop versus UAB, where he was underneath. He was keying quarterback's eyes. There was a over route coming from the opposite side of the field. He was able to identify the over route, identify where the quarterback wanted to go with the football. And as the football was being thrown, he delivers a hit, jars football loose. And that's a lot of what I think he brings to the table. And as an ex-safety, being able to key the quarterback's eyes, have the quarterback's eyes take him to the football, and then be able to make a play. You don't end up with 7 interceptions by happenstance. That's that ex-safety background coming into play. So I like him more so in zone than I do in man. Blitzing capabilities. I watched him versus Toledo. Light it up. 3 sacks in that game, 2 of which came in the first quarter. And he times it up well. Very explosive. And that's where you really get to see his speed and athleticism on full display. When he's blitzing and he's a free hitter, he closes the distance really fast, which speaks to his range. He can close the distance quickly. So really got to see him do that versus Toledo. And 18 career sacks tells you all you need to know. A guy that can get to the quarterback when given the opportunity to do so. You go from those pros to his cons. Awareness, I just feel like he's so slow to react. And much like Jerome Baker, his athleticism suggests that he should be a lot faster to the football than he is. He's usually a step late to the party. Instead of tackling a guy up high, he's tackling a guy up by his ankles because he got there late. So I just like to see him be a little bit more aware of what's going on. Proactive, not reactive. Man coverage is something else that I put down, but I'm not going to kill him for man coverage, but I just like him in zone better. I don't necessarily trust him as a guy in man-to-man coverage from what I saw on tape. Nonetheless, Quinton Poling is a guy that the Dolphins look at as a guy that will be able to help them on specials as a tackling machine, and a guy that can help them in some nickel situations and eventually may work his way onto the field and may be able to help you. And so I look at him as a Kiko Alonso clone. At his best, he's Kiko Alonso, a cheaper, younger version of Kiko Alonso. If he can stay healthy, Quinton Poling could be a guy that may be able to make this roster and ultimately end up being your new Kiko Alonso. So we'll see what happens. But in any event, 7th round, 227th pick, linebacker out of Ohio, Quinton Poling, for me, is and we wrap up this Dolphins draft 2 picks later, 229th overall in the 7th round. New Mexico specialist Jason Sanders is the selection. So I've always said I don't have a problem with a team taking a specialist in the 6th or 7th round. If you feel froggy and you need to leap in the 5th, knock yourself out. 5th through 7th, I'm fine with. I won't kill you for it. I prefer 6th or 7th. But if you're going to make a selection of a specialist, it better be a damn good one. That's all I'm going to say. And I'm not too fond of Jason Sanders. Like, for the most part, when kickers are drafted, I'm like, okay, this guy's probably going to be damn good. And I'm usually impressed with what they did at the collegiate ranks. And, you know, there may be a flaw or here, you know, 1 or 2 here or there. But I'm willing to overlook it because the body of work, the full body of work, is good enough for this guy to come in and be the kicker of the future for the team that drafted him. I'm looking at Jason Sanders, and I'm like, this is a little sketchy, bro. And I'm like, you sure you couldn't get this dude as a priority free agent after the draft was over? You sure you had to spend a 7th round pick on this dude? I mean, let me give you what I was able to find on this guy. So this is what I put down in my notes. After a strong 2016 where he was 12 or 13 on field goals with a long of 52, which is good, Sanders followed that up with a disappointing 2017 season where he was 10 of 15 with a career high of 53 yards. So he hit a career high of 53 yards. So that's good. You know he's got a little bit of leg, but 10 of 15, bro, that's below 70%. What are we doing here, folks? And I don't know about all the kicking conditions, He could have been kicking in a monsoon. He'd been kicking where it was a ton of wind. I don't know, but I just know 10 or 15 is nasty. And that was coming off a year where you were 12 or 13. So that's a little shaky. That's a little dicey for me. And then his first year as a kicker, a starter, in 2015, he was 3 or 7. So you telling me I got a compliment, or I got an asshole sandwich here with 2 bad years and 1 good year in the middle. It's not good enough for me, man. Not for a guy you drafted. Then we go on. His field goal percentage in his career is 71%. You getting drafted, your field goal percentage better be up over 80, and I want it closer to 85, trending towards 90. Okay? That's when you draft a kicker. Not when a dude is hovering around 70. Huh. Take out an awful 2015 from that 3 out of 7 that I mentioned, and it's still only 79%. Closer to 80. So I'm willing to cut him some slack, but he was 25 or 35 in his career. It's not good enough, man. It's not good enough. And then finally, this is part of the reason why I started to lean towards, this is an okay pick. He doubles as a kickoff specialist, 266 career kickoffs. He did it his entire career, every single year of his collegiate career, with a 73% ratio of touchbacks, which is outstanding. Okay, he was booming. He got a big leg, could kick it out the end zone. So that sort of salvaged some things, but I don't give a damn about you. I'll find somebody that can kick off the goddamn football. My punter, somebody will kick that shit off. You, as a field goal kicker, you have the ability to take or place points on the scoreboard. That shit is important. You can't be messing around. And the Dolphins know. They've had issues in the past. That's why they made this pick. They've had issues in the past with field goal kickers. So they know the importance of games coming down to a guy knocking a field goal through the uprights or not. So I don't know if I buy what Jason Sanders is selling. As a matter of fact, in the 7th round, 229th overall selection, specialist out of New Mexico, Jason Sanders for me is. So not one of my favorite Dolphins drafts over the last 5 to 7 years. I'm not going to lie to you. I've been more impressed in past years' drafts with what they were able to accomplish. But nonetheless, there's some intrigue. Look, I love what you did at the top of the draft with Gazecki and Minka Fitzpatrick. Both of those guys, day one starters, come in, instantly help your football team on their respective sides of the football. After that, I've got a ton of question marks. Jerome Baker, he makes me uncomfortable with his inability to stop the run and his hesitance to do certain things. But again, you're getting Raekwon McMillan back. I'm excited. I'm more excited about him than I am Jerome Baker. So I'm hoping he's able to stay healthy because that'll be a nice boost for your defense there. You look at some of the other guys. Kalen Ballage, obviously a wild card for you. A guy that definitely can move the needle for you offensively and be explosive in the backfield. Now you got 2 guys that can be really explosive, and those guys will sandwich in between Frank Gore, a veteran that you know is not going to get hurt, that's going to show these guys the ropes and eat up carries if need be. So you like what you have with Kenyon Drake and now Kalen Ballage, 2 tall, upright runners. You know I like guys that are upright runners with tremendous amounts of speed and athleticism, and then a great wily veteran, a future Hall of Famer in Frank Gore. So like that mixture in the backfield now. And then you look at some of the other picks, and I think Cornell Armstrong could be a late round gem as a slot guy out of Southern Miss, but I can't confirm that, you know, and so there's a lot of question marks in this draft, but nonetheless, solid draft overall. Like what you did early on. Kalen Ballage is a really fun guy to look at and see what he evolves into. We'll see what this draft looks like, but this is what I scored it as. And remember, if you're looking for individual grades for each of these players, go to the website LouieTeeNetwork.net for every single grade that was given to these players, as I was able to break them down. But here's the overall grade for this draft put in by Chris Grier in this Dolphins organization. Obviously, that Jason Sanders pick at the end didn't do them any favors, but nonetheless, it is what it is. We'll see with Tannehill coming back healthy. This has been a weird offseason. You know, a lot of guys being shipped out and sent on their way. Pouncey asked for his release. He's now in Los Angeles with the Chargers. He traded away Jarvis Landry. Got rid of Jay Ajayi during the season last year. So kind of a changing of the guard in Miami. Freshness in that locker room now. And we'll see if it benefits this team. No more Jay Cutler. Dolphins fans aren't too upset about that. So we'll see what the season brings for them. But nonetheless, that's the Dolphins 2018 NFL Draft wrap-up here on the Louie Tee Network. Thank you for joining me. Plenty more where this one came from. Remember, check out the website, louieteenetwork.net, for a lot of great content, as well as the YouTube channel, Louie Tee Network on YouTube. And make sure you're checking out the podcast, Louie Tee Network Podcast, available on Stitcher, iTunes, Google Music, and the website. So check that out as well. But I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. I'll see you next time. Remember, we're changing the game one video at a time. See you next time.
Louie Tee Network.